guys, and welcome back to the Pennies to Pounds podcast with your host, Kia. And this is the podcast where we aim to dispel your myths, simplify difficult financial jargon, and rectify your own personal problems. Happy New Year. I know I said it last week, but Happy New Year. It feels good to be back in the studio. It's actually been 6 months since I was last in the studio recording. Oh my gosh. But we are back again with another amazing episode to get you ready for 2024. And this episode is all about property. Now, we cover property quite a bit on the podcast in different ways. So first-time buyers, renting versus buying. However, today we're covering a topic that we haven't really touched on much, and that is the right to buy scheme. So some of you may know of it already. You may have even gone through it, or you may be talking to your parents about what that means. We are also going to be talking about second-time buyers. It's always about first-time buyers, getting a ladder. But once you've done it and you want to move on, what does that process look like for you? Is it the same thing? Do things change? To answer those questions, I have got a superb guest who is a wealth of knowledge in this field. Guest, who are you?
Thank you very much for the introduction. Good to see you again, by the way.
You too.
My name is Topsy Taiwo. I am the founder of a platform called Property Purchaser, which provides knowledge, guidance, and services to home buyers and home movers to make them make better informed decisions on what they eventually want to go and buy. I've been doing it for about 3 or 4 years or so. In terms of my background, I've been in the industry for about 10 or 11 years now as an estate agent, also a property investment advisor, and I want to say sort of TV market commentator as well.
You definitely have. We've seen you on TV, so yes.
So I've done a few bits and bobs in that field too. And yeah, like my main mission is essentially just to make it digestible, make people make better decisions, and put content out there that's really going to inspire people to go off and buy their first home.
Which is why I think you are the best person to talk about these schemes. But before we get into it,
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you, it's a new year.
Yes.
And everyone always has that, that thing, I'm going to change my life, I'm going to do these things. So let me ask you 2 questions. Number 1, do you have any resolutions? And number 2, if you do, what are they?
Okay, so short answer is no, I didn't.
Okay.
I didn't make any resolutions this year. I have done in the past. What I've tried to do, well, first and foremost, I actually think you shouldn't wait till the new year to make any resolutions anyway. I almost think it's counterproductive to do so because it puts too much pressure on you to make sure you've hit that goal by a particular time frame. And secondly, if you really want to do something, I think you should just act on an impulse right away. I read this thing where the likelihood of you going forward with a goal or achieving that goal is less the longer you leave it. So the moment you have that impulse or you have that itch that you want to scratch, you should scratch it there and then, whether that's March, April, July or August. So to answer your question, no, I didn't make any resolutions. But one thing I have done is I've created some sort of, I haven't finished yet, but I've created a vision document.
Okay, I like that.
Which is sort of like a more long-term, with no specific timeframes on it, but a more long-term thing, document about things I just want to achieve in general, whether it's in 5, 10, 15 years. Just things that are important to me. So that's what I'm working on creating at the moment. But no resolutions.
No resolutions,
for 2024.
but we've got goals in mind.
But I've got goals in mind and things I want to do.
It's interesting that you haven't got any time frames to it because I'm such a goal-oriented person, and anyone who knows me knows I vision board, I goal set, I do all of that. But I always have a time frame. So I'm like my 1-year goal, my 3-year goal, or like in the next month I want to achieve this. It's interesting that you've got your goals, but you don't have a time frame.
I haven't, and I it's not to say I disagree with setting a time frame. Everyone's heard of that acronym SMART goals, where specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-based, right? And the reason I haven't done that is because, again, it's just a pressure thing. Because I remember I sort of set myself a specific date by which I wanted to have my show on TV. I literally made it September the 3rd, 2027. I was like, hold on a second, that's very specific. It almost puts too much pressure on you. So the reason I haven't done it is because of the pressure. And what I'm going to do moving forward is just say what I want to do and make sure I do everything day in, day out in order to increase the likelihood of it happening. So I don't have any specific ones for a year or 2 years or 3 years, but I have things that I want to do within a general time frame as opposed to a very specific date. But that's not to say I disagree with setting a specific date. I think that's what's helpful too.
I like your approach though. It's a cool approach. I think I'm going to consider it. I think I'm going to set some goals that are just open-ended and not really a time frame. Maybe I'm going to try and change to your side and give it a little go.
Because you know what I really want to do though? Like, when people tweet on a day and they say, oh, I'm going to have this done by this date. And then 5 years later, they get
to come back to that tweet.
I would love to do that, but it's setting yourself up. It's a lot of pressure. So I've written some things down, some personal, some I'm happy to share, but no specific dates just yet. We'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens. That's really good to hear. Yeah. But let's get into this episode now. So, right to buy.
Yes.
What is it and how does it work?
So, Right to Buy is a government initiative that essentially gives eligible council tenants the right to buy their home, but most importantly, at a discount. Now, that discount depends on the type of property it is, where the property is, how long you've lived there for, and whether or not you're a secure or not a secure tenant. So the most interesting part about the right to buy scheme is when it comes to the discounts, and that's where it gets really, really exciting, because most people have to buy on the open market, or they've got to use a government scheme which has to make sure that they're buying it at a certain value, whereas right to buy can give you a significant discount. So that's an overview as to what the scheme is, essentially being able to buy a house at a discount when you're a council tenant.
Okay, what does that discount look like? What are we talking here? Let's talk some numbers. I like that.
Let's talk some numbers. So the discount really, again, depends on the type of property that it is and how long you've been a council tenant for. I guess we'll touch on eligibility a bit more later on, but you basically have to have been living there for 3 years. Now, if it's a house, that discount is up to 35% if you've been there for 3 years or more. And after 5 years, that discount increases by % each year that you've lived there, up to a maximum of 70%.
Wow, 70%.
70%. And it gets more interesting when it's a flat, because if it's a flat, that discount increases by 2% each year after 5 years, the longer you've lived there, again, up to 70%.
Wow.
Now, there is a cap. So in London, that cap is 127,900. And outside of London, I think it's around 90,000 or so. So there is a cap. Whichever number is lower, that's the discount that you're going to get. But for some people, having the opportunity to buy your property at a 70% discount potentially is in fact, there's not a word I can really use to describe it that will probably do it justice, but it's incredible. It's an outrageous scheme that I think a lot of people don't really know about. And it's been around for a long time. I think when I was looking into it a few months ago, it was part of a wider scheme of privatisation in the 80s. So in the 80s, the government sold off British Gas, British Telecoms, British Airways, British Petroleum, Rolls-Royce. So lots of things were getting sold off, and this is part of the wider scheme of that. And I think since then, there have been about 2 million homes that have been sold as part of the right to buy scheme, but there are still 4 million homes which sit under council ownership. So there's a lot of people who are sat in those homes who probably either aren't aware of it or think they can't afford it, but it's something you should absolutely look into if you're a council tenant.
I think it's a great scheme. I have friends who are having conversations with their parents, and, you know, that's been put forward to them, you know, right to buy, should we consider it, should we not? But I think a lot of people just don't understand how it works, which you explained to us. And a big thing is, are they eligible?
Yes.
So let's get into the eligibility criteria.
Yes.
What does that look like, that criteria?
So the most important thing is that you have to have been living there for 3 years. That used to have been 5 years, but they've reduced it now. So if you've been in a council home, or if you were part of a housing association that used to be a council home, you can also get what's called a preserved right to buy. So that's the first thing. The property has to be your main residence, so it can't be some investment property.
No, you really got to be living there. I know some people are probably thinking, I'm going to get that and I'm going to rent Airbnb it.
And they will check. It has to have been...
Will they come and check?
You have to have proof that you've had bills that have been going there. Right, They're going to check to make sure it's your main residence. That you're actually using it, That you're actually using it. And you can't be in the process of being evicted as well. So that's what a secure tenant means. So if you're in the process of, you know, you haven't paid your rent, you're getting benefits, but you're using it for something else, you're going to ruin your chances of trying to get that council home. So eligibility is super important. Those are the three main things. And you also, if you've got another person who is living with you, who doesn't necessarily, who hasn't lived there for 3 years, but they've been there for 12 months, they can also be alongside you to help you with that mortgage application when you come to buy it. They don't have to have been there for the whole 3 years. So it really just depends on when you're checking with your council, make sure that you're looking into it so you know that you're eligible.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So when we talk about that then, how does that look like when it comes to mortgage? Because it's a similar process, right? So you get a discount. We've spoken about that. That is really exciting.
Yeah.
But naturally, there is still a percentage that needs to be paid. So
correct.
Deposit-wise, what we're looking at, how does that mortgage process, does it differ? Is it the same as like buying a property normally? What does that look like?
So I'm very happy you touched on that. So when it comes to getting a mortgage for a right to buy property, there are so many lenders out there that are going to be able to help you out. So we'll take a basic example. Let's say you're buying a property at £200,000. But because you got 35% discount, you've been there for 3 years, it's now worth £130,000. So that's the property that you're going to be buying and the value you're going to be buying it at. And let's say you haven't got the income to support getting the whole amount up to £130,000. You can only support it up to, let's say, £60,000. You still need to work out that £70,000. However, you can use the discount of the £70,000 as your deposit to make up the difference to go up to £130,000. So you're essentially buying a house with no deposit, and the only thing that you need to pay for is the legal fees, and you have to have the income to support up to only £60,000. So not saying that's going to be relevant in London, but for other parts of the country, you've got a potential to buy a house there without putting a deposit down at all.
That is like mind-blowing.
Which is mind-blowing, right? So, and you only have to have been living there for 3 years. And even if you haven't got the income to support the 60,000, you can also use something which is called joint borrower sole proprietor, which essentially means that you can buy the property with somebody else. You're on the title deeds, but they're not on the title deeds. They're just helping you boost your income affordability.
So like parents, for example.
Parents, and I think you can have up to an additional 3 people on your mortgage application as well to help you try and buy that property. So there's a number of ways in which lenders and banks are going to try and help you to get onto the ladder because they know you're getting a discount. And the moment they've helped you buy that property, on paper it's saying 130, but we all really know it's worth 200k.
Yes.
So for them, there's risk attached to it, but it's a high reward on the other side of it.
Yeah. Let me ask you this question then, because that all sounds great. And this is coming off the back of conversations I've had with people that I know when it comes to this. So I'm going to give you a scenario.
Yes.
There's a family home, right? Yep. And, you know, mum's there. Mum wants to buy the house and she wants her kids on, you know, to help her with the right to buy scheme.
Yes.
She has 3 children, for example. One works. So one can contribute, like, is in their income can be contributed. The other 2 don't work. Okay. Maybe they're students, you know, they're just not working. But she wants all of them to be in an application.
Okay.
Does that make sense for this to go
for this scenario?
Yeah.
So the way in which a lender's always going to look at this is income and affordability and also credit. So just like you'd get any other mortgage, they're going to look into what your income is, what your outgoings are, and do an income and expenditure, as well as a debt to income ratio, as well as all the other ID checks that you've got to do. And because you can have up to an additional 3 people on that mortgage, you can spread your risk, or you can spread the application across those 3 people. So in this particular scenario, if you just wanted to use one income, you can do that. If other people have also got incomes, you can also use that. But the best way to look at it is to use everyone as a team in order to try and support that application. So whoever's got the income, whoever's got the relevant ID checks, whoever's got the relevant eligibility, it's fine. But the most important thing to remember is if only one person is eligible for that council home, you can still use the other people to try and help you support that mortgage. So in your scenario, I'm assuming the mother might be the only one who's qualifying to have been there for the 3 or 5 years or whatever. She can use her children to support her mortgage application.
Amazing.
Because there have been a few scenarios where someone's maybe 50, 60 years old, and most lenders want to give you maybe 10, maybe 15 years max on the mortgage. So your repayments are going to be sky high. So you can use your kids and they're going to use their ages instead of your age in order to use that mortgage application for you to go and buy that property at a monthly amount that's actually affordable to you. So there's ways around it. And in that scenario, I'm sure she spoke to a good broker. They'd be able to find a product for her, so long as they weren't in the process of being evicted. Yeah, that's good. I like to position scenarios sometimes. So some of our listeners who may think that's where I'm at, does that make sense? People can kind of get that.
Definitely.
So,
the right to buy scheme.
Yes.
All sounds amazing, right?
Yes.
I want to go move in the council place now and be there 3 years, right? All sounds great.
Yeah.
Let me ask you then, are there any pitfalls or anything that we should be aware of? Because I think there's a lot of government schemes out there that all look shiny and bright on paper. And then when you actually get into the crux of it, there are things you're like, but you got to realise it's this, or actually it's that. Is there anything like that with the right to buy scheme?
There's always fine print with everything. Yeah. It's never just a rosy scenario, and the exact same applies to right to buy as well. For me personally, I think it's a net gain. It's a net win-win situation if you're in a council home. Because one of my favourite quotes is choose your hard. Like, everything's hard. Like, which one are you going to do? Do you want to suffer now and have a reward later? Or do you want to have your rewards now and then suffer later? Both options are going to be hard for you, and it's the same with right to buy. So yes, there are pitfalls, but I think it's overall a net gain. So the first one to be fully aware of is if you sell your council home within 10 years of you using that discount and using the right to buy scheme, you have to give the housing association or your original landlord first right of refusal. Okay. That's right. So they get the first 8 weeks, and if they haven't sold it, then you can put it on the open market. The second one is a bit more, I guess, punitive or stringent, is if you sell it within 5 years, you may have to pay back all or some of the discount. Okay. So first year, if you sell it within the first year, that discount's going back.
Yeah, of course, because you haven't done anything with it. You didn't even want it, really, if you sold it in the first year.
That discount is going straight back, because why are you buying it and then selling it and trying to think you're going to make some profit? Look, if the market's risen so much so that you can give the discount back and you can make some profit, then fine, no worries. But you're giving that discount back, and it's going to be the discount at the value of that property at that time.
Right, so if it's like 70% and it's gone up, it's going to be 70% of the new value.
Of the new value, not the old value. So they're getting their money back in some way or another. But that discount that you've got to pay back reduces over time. So for example, if you sell it after 2 years, it's not 100% of the discount, it's 80% of the discount. 3, 4, 5 years. So after 5 years, it'll be none of the discount at which you can sell it back. So those are the two main restrictions that you're going to find. The other question I always get asked, or have been asked in the past about this, is can you rent out your right to buy property after you've bought it. Now, this is a topic.
Everyone's always interested in that. Everyone's like, how can I make some money? What can I do?
What can I do? Right? This is a topic that's quite interesting because it's not so much to do with the council. The council, once they've got their money, don't really care, to be honest with you, because they're looking to use this money to then fund other operations that they've got. So it's more so with the lender, because if you're getting a residential mortgage, you're in essence committing mortgage fraud. If you then,
because
if you
technically
then rent it out.
you're telling them I'm going to get this mortgage and I'm going to live here.
Correct. And a lot of lenders don't look. If you're asking me, will they find out? No comment.
Yeah.
No comment. But on paper, it's not something that you should do. However, you can get something which I'm sure you know about as called consent to let. So what I did on my property, so I first bought it on a resi and then my circumstances changed and then I had a consent to let my property out. And then eventually I built my equity up enough where I've got it on an actual buy-to-let mortgage now and it's rented out. I can live there when I want. I can use it for serviced accommodation. So that's something you can use or you can look into in the future as well. So those are the main stipulations when it comes to your right to buy.
Okay. Do you know what? Overall, even though there are some pitfalls, like you mentioned, I don't think it's that bad. So if you are in a council house and you do have the chance to use that discount, I think it's a great thing to look into. Or talk to your parents. Sometimes parents get letters and they have no idea what it means, so they dismiss it. Have a conversation with your parents. See if you can do that. See if you guys can band together and make it happen. I think, why not?
100%. I think I saw something on the Shade Bar recently where some lady bought her right to buy property and then a year later, the council
Yes, I saw that.
Did you see that?
Yes, I saw that.
They said they were going to knock it down. And
yes.
She was like, I should never have bought it.
But she got back more than what she paid.
Hold on a second. You've just been given basically a free house. And when they're going to buy it at the value it's worth at today. And even if they didn't, you got a discount on it, like a significant one, at least 35% off.
I think so, yeah.
So you've made money either way. They were going to knock down that building anyway.
Oh, regardless. Even when she bought it, okay.
Because a lot of these council homes, yes, they say ask for permission.
Yeah.
But it's getting knocked down.
We're asking just to be nice. It's going.
It's not nice to say, but like I've rarely seen situations where the council hasn't won because ultimately it's for the greater good of society, it's for the greater good of that community. And yes, they'll rehouse you. It might not be where you want to be, but ultimately it's probably going to happen. So I sort of say to people like that, if you're worried and you buy a place and then it's not going to be there after a while, it's the lesser of two evils. That's the way I would like to look at it. I would look at it. Yeah.
Do you know what? That just reminded me I remember when I was like 4. Right? Yeah. The first place that we ever lived in was a council block, and I lived on top of a council block. And I remember vividly. Obviously, I'm 4. I don't know the ins and outs, right? But we obviously. The council said, you got to get out. Yeah. We're going to get rid of this, right? Mm-hmm. And I remember my mum said, we're going to go out for breakfast, like the council doing something. Do you know where we went?
Where?
We went to the council block across the way from where I lived. Okay. Yeah. Bear in mind, we had been rehoused at this point. Mm-hmm. But across the way from where I lived, and I remember eating a croissant at 4 years old, and we counted down from 10 to 1. Yeah. And they pushed, and I watched my family home fall down. I remember. Are you serious? I found the pictures the other day, man. I sent me the pictures of that day when I'm there just like a young girl eating a croissant.
That's
watching my family home.
Right? That's traumatic.
Ingrained. That was like 21 years ago. Yeah. And it's ingrained in my head.
Wow. Yeah. The way they sort of...
Well, they invited us to come and watch it.
Let's go for breakfast, just real quick. Yeah, we'll come back.
I remember that. My mum gave me orange juice and a croissant, and I watched my family home just fall down. I was like, this is insane.
You know what this is reminding me of? It's just like this. I don't know what it is. Just black parents do this all the time. Yeah. It's like when the kid's about to go to Nigeria, and they're not coming back. So, we're going on holiday to Nigeria. 10 years later, Mum, when's our flight back to?
It's not happening.
It's not happening, bro.
It's not happening.
I've literally got friends and cousins that's actually happened to. I'm like, why are we still here though?
I know. Honestly, that just reminded me when you said that. Do it. I mean, it is what it is. It is what it is. Yeah. But let's now move on to the other part of this episode. So we're going to talk about second-time buyers. Everything's always about first-time buyers, right? Getting the property out. And we've done a lot of episodes on that thus far. Now I want to talk about second-time buyers. So that's people who have bought their house, I don't know, maybe 3-5 years ago. They're going to sell it. Now they want to go through that process again. Yes. So what does that process look like? Does it differ from first-time buyers? Just talk us through that.
Absolutely. So... the main difference I like to say when it comes to being a home mover, i.e. you own a property, you're looking to sell it and move on, is you suddenly go from being a buyer to also being a seller. That's the main difference. And when you're selling a property, there's so much more that comes into it. You're basically spinning 2 separate plates now. So you need to bear so many more things in mind, how you're going to present your property, the estate agent that you're going to choose, also the finance options that you're looking to use. So those are the main differences. The good thing is that you've probably... in most circumstances, built up a good amount of equity. I always say getting on the first rung of the property ladder is the hardest thing you can possibly do. But when people are moving on to the next place, all of a sudden those deposit requirements, they're large numbers, but it's probably sat in the bricks and mortar in your home as well. So you're able to probably find it slightly easier in order to get what you want. But I would say the main difference is that you go from being a seller to being a buyer as well. Sorry, you go from being just a buyer to being a seller as well. The other thing I'll say on this is you lose your stamp duty benefits.
Yes. Oh, the good old stamp duty.
You're no longer a first-time buyer. So if you plan on keeping your property, not only are you paying normal stamp duty rates, but you're also paying the additional 3% stamp duty rate as well. I've seen some horrific, because I was an estate agent for, I don't know if I said, I was estate agent for 6 or 7 years in total, and I've seen some horrific stamp duty bills, man. Like, sometimes I'm like, that's a deposit, bro. Like,
really? Oh my god.
That's a deposit, bro, especially in London as well.
Yeah.
Where I was an estate agent. So you're talking significant sums of money. But again, luckily the pressure should be taken off of you if you've bought well in the right area and you've built up a good amount of equity within your property. So those are the two main differences.
Okay, that makes sense. So we can discern the difference between being a first-time buyer and a second-time buyer. So when it comes to like the actual financing of this, then what options are available? Because like I said, we've spoken about a lot of things for first-time buyers. Are there schemes for second-time buyers? Is it just you got to have the money and you just go for it? What does that look like then?
So a big myth I want to dispel is sometimes people think every scheme is just for first-time buyers. That's not actually true. When it comes to shared ownership, good example, you can also have owned a property in the past and still use that government scheme. I'm not sure off the top of my head of other schemes that allow you to do that, but there are also schemes that help you as a second-time buyer. But in terms of finance options, this is where a mortgage broker becomes literally non-negotiable. For people who just go straight to a lender or their original bank as a second-time mover, I just think, why are you doing that? Because you're talking bigger sums of money here. So those differences in interest rates,
they mean a lot.
A half percent base, they mean a lot. It means a lot. You're talking a huge amount of money that you're going to be putting out every single month. So always go and speak to a broker, even if you think your bank is the best bank in the world. And then also when it comes to if you're keeping your property and you want to rent it out, all of a sudden you potentially become a landlord as well, which a lot of people I know are going to be in that situation. I was in that situation myself. So you then need to think about how much equity you're leaving in your property. The rental requirements and the calculations when it comes to buy-to-lets are just, like I'm usually quite good with sort of going off the top, but even in my head, sometimes I need to go back in my eye. Let me go through this criteria again of what it means to be a landlord, how much rent they need, the interest cover ratio. Like there's so many different calculations that go into it. So you really want to speak to a broker to make sure that they are giving you the best advice possible, because we're talking small percentages, but big differences. That's the thing I would say when it comes to being a second-time mover. Last thing I'll say on this is estate agents. I was an estate agent for a long time.
Yes, so you know the ins and outs.
I know the ins and outs. When you're a second-time mover, like you really want to. You need to choose the right agent to sell your property. Like,
how do you know? Okay, let's get into that then. How do you know who's good and who's not? I've mentioned before in the podcast, my dad is a landlord.
Yes.
So he's got a fair few properties. And he's had experiences with estate agents. And because of his proximity to them, so have I.
Yes.
They're not always great. Sometimes he'll come to me angry, like, I'm going to be on the phone to them. He's not always happy, right? So I know from his experience, I know what that looks like.
Yes.
But how do you know who's going to be good, who's going to work in your favour, who's just going to just do what they need to do and take their percentage? Like, how do you pick?
It's a great question. There's so many things you can touch on. I think friendly recommendations are always amazing. I think in any industry, that's always going to be massive. Google reviews, always look at that. A lot of agents are going to have them on there, and a lot of people, when they're disappointed with the service,
they will
say
review.
Something.
They will
it's
review.
funny that, isn't it? Because when you're happy, you tend not to really leave a review.
Not really.
But when you're disappointed in the service, you're going to make everyone know about it.
I have done that. I've written like complaint letters. I found the email and I did not enjoy my service. Yeah.
So you can look at that as well. The other thing I'll say is ring up an estate agent as a buyer. Mystery. Or get your friend or cousin to, right? Because if that person's going to be selling your property, you want to know how they're going to treat incoming buyers. And it's amazing how many agents just don't pick up the phone.
Really?
So imagine your house is on the market. You've got a really hot cash buyer who's looking to buy something. They're in the country for 3 or 4 days, for example. And this literally happens quite often in London. And they want to choose out of the best thing that they've seen out of 4 or 5 properties they see on that day. Now, you're an agent who's got 2 people who only work maybe 9 to 5, don't work on the weekends. A property in their books is what that cash buyer might like. The phone's ringing, they just don't pick it up, and then they ring another agent, they pick up and they go and buy their property. Do you see what I mean? Like little differences like that can cost, can potentially cost you a sale. So those are my 3 tips: reviews, friendly recommendations, ring up as a mystery buyer, And there's loads of questions you can ask an estate agent as well. What's your marketing strategy? How many have you sold? What comparable evidence have you got that you've sold that property? And just go off of your gut. Like, remember, this is the person who's representing your biggest asset. You want to make sure that it's a good person representing you.
I like that. That's some good advice you give, especially ringing a mystery buyer.
Yes,
I like that.
do that.
I can put on my acting hat and I can be like, hello, I'm interested. Yeah, that's good. That's a good bit.
I would recommend that highly. Seriously.
Yeah, I like that one. I'm going to ask you then. So you mentioned it's second time mover. So I'm saying second time buyer, but you're right, second time mover. What should the process be like? If someone's looking to move and obviously to sell their current property, should they sell first, complete that way, and then buy? Should you do the two simultaneously? Like, what does that? What would you say is the best way to go about it?
So there's no right or wrong answer, and of course everyone's situation is going to be different in terms of the priorities, whether it's actually feasible to move out into rented. I would always say, if possible, if you're selling a place and you're looking to buy another place, move what's called chain free. You can find yourself in a situation where there's 7 different links in a chain, and agents as a whole are likely not to be very good at keeping communication throughout that process. Imagine dealing with 7 different parties and trying to coordinate dates. Because when completion happens, you remember, it's got to be the same day of completion for everyone.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Because the money is literally going plop, 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 like across the chain.
Yeah.
So in order to try and organize that can be a nightmare. So I always say, if you're selling and buying, try and secure your sale first. If you're lucky enough to be buying a place that's vacant, then I say, okay, fine, no problem at all. You can tie it in. But if that person's also buying somewhere else, try and break the chain. So whether it's moving into rented, whether it's, I don't know, going abroad for a year, staying with family, staying with parents, is just going to put you in a much better position. The other thing I would say is once that seller who you're buying from knows that you need to sell, you sort of lose a bit of bargaining power and a little bit of leverage.
Yeah.
Because they say, well, you've got to complete on this day anyway, so now you've got to buy it for this price. And there's nothing you can really do about it.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying it's going to be feasible and possible for everyone, but try and move chain free if you can. It gives you more leverage, and it also gives you a bit more peace of mind where you don't have any pressure to satisfy the buyer and satisfy the seller because you're stuck in the middle.
That makes sense. It reminds me of when we moved. So we moved from London to Ipswich. We had a house in London. And I remember we found out that the sellers were moving somewhere like Scotland, Wales, they're moving. So they were trying to like buy their property and then complete with us. But the good thing was, I think it wasn't working out on their time frame. So they went to go stay with family instead so we can just complete and then they could figure it out on their end. Because they're trying to say, well, we can't go into ours until blah, blah. They just said, we'll stay with family. We can complete on this date and then you guys can get the keys. Everything can just move on.
And it was just a smoother process,
It was way smoother because I thought it was never going to happen. I thought we're never going to make the move. It's just going to take forever. But that was way smoother. Like you said, once you break that chain.
It makes it so much easier. And
so much easier.
The conveyancing process, as you've been through it yourself, like it's just a nightmare. Yeah. Like on average, sales are taking about 3 or 4 months to go through. And imagine all of a sudden, and I've been in this situation before where the day of exchange, the seller says, you know what? I don't know if I can complete on this day anymore. So I'm going to come back to you when I can complete. And then I'll let you know in a few weeks' time. So whoa, hold on a second. Hold on a second. It's like, no, that can't be done because there's always someone in the chain who just isn't that desperate. Like,
someone's very calm
they just
and relaxed.
don't really care, innit? Or maybe it's an investor who lives abroad who just says, oh, my son might be coming to stay in that flat now for the next month. So can we just push the... No, we can't just push the completion date by a month. Everyone's lined up for removals. Yeah. I've got my furniture ordered. My kids start school in September. Like we can't, like, so people just do that. So that's why just remove yourself from facing those situations and just move chain free if you can.
If you can.
Because chains are a nightmare. Estate agents don't like them, sellers don't like them, buyers don't like them. So
no more chains. We're breaking free from those chains. Break them free.
If you can.
Topsy, this has been such an insightful episode. But before we end, I want to ask you, what are the 3 tips that you'd give to anyone who's either, it's up to you, looking to pursue the right to buy scheme, or a second-time mover looking to go down that process? You can give a mix of tips. It's up to you. 3 tips.
Okay. First tip I'll give is I've written a book recently. So go and buy my book. Shameless plug.
Go for it.
But I touch on a lot of things in there. I touch on whether you shouldn't buy. Actually, there's a whole section on why buying is a terrible idea. Maybe you should just stay renting and, really think about why you're doing it in the first place and not just giving into societal pressures and keeping up with the Joneses and figuring out what your why is. Not your property why, but just your why in general and whether or not home ownership fits into that. So that's the first thing you should do. Buy my book and read that section specifically. The second thing I would say, or the second tip is... check out your podcast and just dive more into what you do, because I feel like in the whole finance space, I specifically focus on property. But before you get to that stage, you need to work out how to save your money. You need to work out how to grow your money and nurture it as best as you can. And like a lot of people I speak to haven't even got anywhere near the stage of where they can even think about home ownership. And it's inextricably tied to being able to save well. So I would say like dive into Kia's content. She's very consistent and makes amazing content, to dive into that. And third tip, what can I think of? Environment. I spoke about this recently on another panel as well, whereby not just who you hang out with, but our digital environment is pretty much where we spend all of our time now. I was thinking a bit the other day about how like influential it is on our lives. Like just the things you follow on Twitter, the things you follow on Instagram, things you follow on Snapchat. I'm not saying,
completely remove
unfollow your friends.
Yeah, get rid of everyone, all the bad vibes, and just keep.
That's unrealistic, and it's actually not something you should do anyway. But just be a bit more mindful, even if it means, because I've got 2 pages on my personal page. I follow everything.
Yeah.
But on my property page, where I spend more time, it's all about property, and it's amazing how much I've learned just by the proxy of having a property feed. It's like I'll just be scrolling along it, and most of it's value, and not all of it is just celebrity gossip, right? So I would say like think about the environment digitally just as much as you do about the people you spend time with. And I promise you'll be more likely to reach your goal faster than if you wouldn't, because those moments where you've got downtime and you're just subject to your environment, you're going to be getting value as opposed to just getting gossip from something that's not going to add to your life. So those are my 3 tips. Buy my book, dive into your content, and figure out your digital environment.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Topsy. This has been such a great episode. For everyone listening and watching, where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Topsy Taiwo. Yes, Taiwo is my real surname. Everyone always asks me that because it's actually Nigerian for twin, but it means it is my surname. But yeah, Topsy Taiwo, and my platform is at Property Purchaser across all social platforms. You can find me there.
Amazing. And the links will also be in the episode description, so make sure you check that out, as well as Topsy's book. It'll be in the
buy my
description.
book.
Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. We're back in next week with another episode. Next week's episode is going to be all about life insurance. So if that's something you've been considering or don't know much about, make sure you come back next week. Bye, guys.